Michigan's biggest preseason problem may not be a problem anymore because 5 players who were supposed to be questions, depth pieces, or future answers are suddenly forcing their way into the 2026 conversation. And that matters because in this episode of the Big Ten Huddle presented by FanDuel, where Michigan is currently the strongest Big Ten favorite to go under their win total, under at 8.5 at minus, or under their win total of 8.5 at minus 188 on FanDuel. That is a loud message from the market. They're saying, prove it. Prove the new staff works. Prove Bryce Underwood has taken the jump. Prove enough of the roster around him is ready, because if the good news doesn't start coming in fast, that 8.5 win total could become a 7.5 win total in a hurry. But here's what's interesting, because Michigan is finally starting to get some of that good news that teams want out of fall camp. And no, I'm not talking about Bryce Underwood. Of course, there's going to be good news about him. He's going to develop under actual quarterback coaching. That's going to happen. I'm not talking about a preseason award list good news, not somebody saying everybody looks great because it's August. I'm talking about players showing up in places where Michigan genuinely needed answers. And there are 5 of them I want to talk about in this video, because if even 3 or 4 of these camp developments are real, Michigan's ceiling looks different this year. Let's start with the one I think is the most fun, and that is freshman wide receiver Travis Johnson. Michigan did not need another receiver who might be good in 2027. It needed another receiver who could help Bryce Underwood now add to the depth of the room. Andrew Marsh is a known piece. J.J. Buchanan looks like another major piece. But after those two, you have Jamie French, and that looks pretty good. Celeste Moa, Channing Goodwin, and Johnson. You have options after your first 2 that have proven themselves. And Johnson keeps coming up a lot. Veteran corner Jair Hill has talked about the young receivers challenging him in practice, and Johnson has been one of the names that stands out a lot. Wide receiver coach Micah Simon has praised his athleticism, his ability to attack the football in the air, and the growth he has made from spring into fall camp. And that matters because Johnson is not just some little slot receiver you can manufacture touches to over the middle with drag routes. He's a 6'3" player who has a basketball background, and the combination of size, skill, speed, ball skills, he gives Michigan another type of target out there. Listen, I'm not telling you Travis Johnson is suddenly wide receiver 1. That would be ridiculous, okay? He's not Andrew Marsh or anything like that. The point is that Michigan may have gone from asking, do we have enough receivers for Bryce, to asking, how do we get all these guys the ball? How do we get all these guys on the field? And that is a much better problem to have. And Johnson is only the first freshman creating that kind of conversation, because Savion Hyder, he might be forcing Michigan to completely rethink how quickly it uses its running backs. Now, he's been talked about for a while, okay? I'm not talking about anything new here. Hyder came in with the 5-star expectations, so nobody should be shocked that he is talented. What gets my attention is how the staff talks about the way he practices. Offensive coordinator Jason Beck basically described Hyder as a kid who does not know how to go half speed. He attacks everything, full speed all the time. Beck's larger point was that the freshmen with that mentality tend to give themselves a chance to play early. And then Andrew Sprague added another layer to it. He talked about Hyder's size, his speed, and this word, it's an important word, his suddenness, the kind of back who can make a quick cut and create an explosive run, an explosive play out of nowhere. Now, Jordan Marshall's still the guy. I'm not trying to dispute that here. This is going to be a great running back duo, but Michigan does not need Hyder to take Marshall's job for that to happen. It needs him to make the running back room more dangerous, be the running back 2 behind Marshall, and you're going to have a great duo in the backfield up in Ann Arbor once again. Think about what this does for Bryce Underwood as well. If Michigan can lean on Marshall, bring in Hyder without the offense falling off, and force defenses to respect multiple backs who can create explosives, Underwood does not have to carry this offense by himself every Saturday. That brings us to the offensive line, because none of those weapons really matter at all if Michigan can't protect Underwood and they can't get these guys, the ball with the openings and holes to be able to go through. Andrew Babalola might be the most important name on this entire list. He was a 5-star offensive tackle, but he lost the 2025 season with an ACL injury. And now, instead of slowly working his way back as a developmental piece, he is right in the middle of the competition for left tackle. Kyle Whittingham has said Andrew Babalola, Blake Frazier, and Evan Link to a certain extent, but I think he's moved to guard, have been getting significant work there. That is not a settled battle yet, and I actually think that is important to say. Camp buzz can get dangerous when you turn he's competing into like he's won the job, and we don't know that yet. I'm sure we'll get figure that out at least game one, but I'm sure we'll get there with that. But if Babalola is healthy enough and good enough after missing an entire year to force Michigan into a real decision at left tackle, that is very encouraging because the upside here is obvious. Michigan has a quarterback it expects to build around. It has upgraded the receiver room. It has a loaded running back room. If a former 5-star tackle now becomes one of the best 5 offensive linemen you have, suddenly the structure around Underwood makes a lot more sense. And this is where I come back to the FanDuel number of the 8.5 at minus 188. It's not crazy when you look at their schedule, and that's the biggest thing that you're going to need all of these young guys for, even if they're just depth, because Oklahoma comes to Ann Arbor in week 2. Penn State comes to town. Indiana comes to town. Michigan has to go to Oregon in November and then finish at Ohio State, and that's always a dogfight. Even if Kyle Whittingham doesn't hate Ryan Day, it's still going to be a dogfight every time. There are losses available on this schedule. That is exactly why these camp developments matter so very much. Michigan cannot afford to enter September still trying to figure out left tackle, still wondering who catches the ball, and still hoping young talent eventually becomes useful. The answers have to come now, and I know Kyle Whittingham is communicating that to his guys, because defensively, we're seeing the same thing too. Dominic Nichols is probably my favorite defensive camp development at this point for Michigan, not because Nichols came out of nowhere. He played last season. Michigan knew it had something there, but Andrew Sprague calling Nichols the best pass rusher on the team changes the conversation a lot. That is a serious praise when you consider the type of defensive talent Michigan expects to put on the field. Nichols has been battling Cameron Brandt for a starting role opposite of John Henry Daly, and the more you hear his name, the more this starts to look less like a depth chart battle and more like Michigan discovering a potential difference maker for their team. That is a massive, massive difference between having solid edge depth and having somebody, that offenses have to account for every single time they're in third down. Maybe even, you know what I'm saying. I don't have to go into that. But if Nichols is really becoming that guy, this defense gets easier to build around. You can do more on the back end when you can pressure with 4. You can make quarterbacks uncomfortable without living on blitzes. You can create the kind of negative plays that flip drives. Again, Camp Praise is not a sack against Ohio State, but best pass rusher on the team is the kind of comment I had to write down as soon as I saw it because I knew we'd be talking about him in one of these episodes. And then there's Nathaniel Staline. This might be the least flashy name on the list and the potential one that matters the most, all right? Or is the most important, I guess you could say. Michigan entered camp with real questions at linebacker, so much so that they contacted Trent Hendricks, according to a report by some Michigan media. There were multiple candidates, but there has not, one obvious lock-in answer. Staline came over from North Dakota State with production, but moving from North Dakota State into the middle of Michigan's defense in the Big Ten is still a jump. So what has Kyle Whittingham emphasized? It's instincts, it's tackling, using your hands, getting off blocks, and essentially just football intelligence. Those are exactly the traits you want from a linebacker who has to make the defense function instead of just trying to chase highlights. And Whittingham has made it pretty clear that Staline is going to figure prominently into this defense. That does not necessarily mean every snap. It does not mean the linebacker battle is over, but this is what good camp news looks like. Michigan has a question, a player is beginning to look like an answer, and when you put all 5 of these together, this is the real story. Travis Johnson gives Bryce Underwood another receiving weapon. Savion Hyder and his ability to improve and go full speed at all times gives Michigan another explosive back and hopefully somebody who can block in the backfield as well. Andrew Babalola could stabilize the most important open spot on the offensive line. Dominic Nichols might be the emerging pass rusher that Michigan needs the most to be opposite of John Henry Daly. And then Nathaniel Staley might be turning linebacker from a concern into a strength, because you can have all the athleticism in the world, but if you don't have the football IQ, you're not going to be a good linebacker. None of these developments guarantee Michigan wins 9, 10, 11, 12 games. All right, I want to make that clear. But they attack the exact reasons why somebody would bet the team under on the 8.5. That is why I think Michigan is one of the most fascinating teams in the Big Ten this season. The market is skeptical. The schedule is brutal. There is a new coaching staff. There are legitimate questions on this roster, but you have a really good head coach in Kyle Whittingham. If Michigan keeps getting answers like those over the final stretch of camp, we might look back and realize the Wolverines were being judged on the questions they had in July instead of the team they actually became by September. And that is the part I want to hear from Michigan fans about. Which of these 5 camp developments do you believe is the most real, the most, thing you can rely on most, and which player do you think matters the most to get Michigan over that 8.5 win total? Like the video, subscribe for more Big Ten football and Big Ten basketball analysis. Join us here at the Big Ten Huddle, and drop your comment in the comment section below. And join us on Sunday nights and Tuesday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern time, live here on YouTube. Me and Zach recapping the entire week of football on Sunday night. Tuesday night, we are previewing the entire week of football, all Big Ten, all the time. We talk a little bit of the other stuff, but all Big Ten, all the time here on the Big Ten Huddle. Thanks so much for listening and watching. Have a good one. We'll see you next time.